Good morning and welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok at Hawk Blogger. Yes, as TikTok shuts down, I join. That's the goal here. I'm going to try to join as many things that are dying as possible. And speaking of joining dying things, we've got two amazing guests to join this Hawk Blogger Mornings Sunday Wildcard Weekend as the dreams of the Los Angeles Chargers fans and the dreams of the Pittsburgh Steelers fans have died. They have died. They have met a fiery death on the Saturday of Wildcard Weekend. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a lot of draft stuff. We will do some mock drafts and mock our own drafts. But before we do all that, let's bring in the fellas. First, my co-host for Real Hawk Talk and every once in a while on here, Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing well. I love the stash, man. I know your wife's never been huge on it, but man, I'm jealous. That is a hell of a stash.
Yeah, every once in a while I get bored with whatever I've got going on my face and decided to mess around. And so today I was gonna go really short beard, but I was like, well, let's see what it looks like. And I was like, I don't hate it, and my wife might, so let's do it. So
yeah, I think bored with my face would be, maybe a step up from where I am generally, but I think that's good. Facial hair is fun to play with.
I think.
Yeah. And for the first time ever, I believe, we get to have this combination. I think Nathan Ernst and Griff Sturgeon have been on before together without me. I've been on with Griff, but I've never had this trio together. So I'm looking forward to it. Griff Sturgeon coming back from Seattle Overload podcast. How are you doing, Griff?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Nathan, the stash is strong. Looking good. Yeah, happy to be back, guys.
Griff, I don't know if I've talked to you since I had my bear encounter. I felt like very close kinship with you when that happened.
It's surreal, isn't it?
It is. And now I'm like, do I have to carry bear spray with me when I go on hikes across literally across the street from my house? Is that where I live now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I ever since I saw the cougar, I bring a very tall stick with me. I read that's a pretty effective deterrent. They see that, they get spooked. But yeah, I don't think you need mace. You just gotta, be alert. The one you saw, he seemed to have he was limping a little bit. He was limping
a little bit. You say about being alert. I don't think I could have been less alert than I was. I mean, I was like home field advantage. I mean, I'm walking in basically my backyard with my dog, and I'm in a intense text debate with Evan and Jeff and whoever about something really stupid. I'm looking directly down at my phone, and just outside my peripheral vision, I see a ball of fur start moving very quickly. Like it was probably 3 to 4 feet in front of me. Like it was really close. Yeah. Luckily, it took off the other direction, but yeah. It was cool. It was cool, but I'm glad I could say it was cool and not worse.
I think it's funny that Evan might have indirectly have gotten you killed just through having an argument with him.
It is very possible that could be something that happens in my life. Griff, I feel like you had a very what's the word? I want to say you had a very good year, but it was you had a very predictive year. I think a lot of your takes seemed to come to fruition, and Jordan Brooks had a nice year for Miami. I know you're probably bummed he didn't get Pro Bowl or All Pro or anything like that, but more recognized as a good player. You had the linebackers absolutely flame out in Seattle and called that. You had concerns about the offense and what you were seeing early on, even when it was 3-0 and things were going relatively well. And here we are. So I feel like the crystal ball of Griff is something we need to tap into. Before we get into all the other stuff, I mean, talk to me about what your kind of recap was of the Seahawks season. Where do you think the Seahawks are right now?
Well, I also thought Kayvon Wallace was going to be a sneaky Pro Bowler. That was where I was pitching my tent, and that didn't happen either. And then I think I got everything wrong last year as well for the 22. So, the ebbs and flows of predicting sports. But Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as the season goes, like Mike McDonald doesn't care at all what happened last year or the year before. Like we as fans, and probably Schneider, maybe the team, bring in a lot of baggage into every season, right? But as far as Mike goes, I mean, it's year zero for him, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, having a winning season, navigating some turbulence in the middle of the year, just with it not going maybe exactly how you thought it would, and the fact that he came out the other end of it. I mean, they ended the year a strong team. I think as far as Mike goes, it was a pretty solid season, and a lot signals positively for year two. I mean, they're not out of the woods everywhere, right? There's still some big question marks, primarily on offense, and the OC hire will matter a lot. But like, there are still some kinks to work out on defense. But hey, they made a huge jump. They didn't have to make all the jumps in year one, right? So, all in all, like, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can take it, but I think they're on the right track more than they're not. So,
Nathan, I don't know if I've talked to you since really this season. We're going to do our season recap show this Wednesday with everybody from Real Hawk Talk. We'll go through all our predictions, how good and bad some of them were. I have a feeling you ended up winning the JSN yardage prediction because he had such a friggin' shit game in the final game. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was a cinch to get that one, but lo and behold, 9 yards. So before, we won't get deep in that here, but what's kind of your takeaway? Where do you leave the season? What's your feeling that you leave the season with?
Yeah, a little bit of mixed feelings. I mean, I think, the biggest thing to figure out last year was head coach, obviously. And I'm not 100% sold Mike McDonald's going to win a Super Bowl for this team. He's, like that level of him on him, but he's clearly a good coach, right? He's capable. It was his first year. He's, got tons to opportunities to grow, and seems like a guy who will grow. Really enjoyed listening to him in his press conferences every time, he talked and all that kind of stuff. And there were ups and downs on the field that need to get figured out, but obviously a guy that's proved he can coach some football, right? So in that respect, it was, I think, really positive, and I'm excited about what he's going to continue to do, and obviously how he fills out the staff and other things. But then, the flip side of it is, this is a team that last year fired a Hall of Fame coach because, 9 and 10 wins every year wasn't good enough. And that's basically exactly where they still are. And, they're not, the cupboard's not bare for them to go and get better and get out of this rut, but it's not overflowing either. And so looking forward, it's like, well, they nailed probably their biggest question, but this problem of how do we get out of this wheel of above average, not good enoughness, that is still a pretty open question to me.
Yeah, well, let's look around the games from yesterday as kind of portents of the future, portends of the future, of possible future. So Steelers fans, probably the closest thing to Pete Carroll fans, like the Seahawks fans from the past 10 years, right? Like Mike Tomlin, he never had a losing record in the playoffs all the time, and they're ready to eject him into the sun. Like, they have an elite defense. They have a defensive player of the year candidate. They have like things that the Seahawks would love to have. And where are they? They're nowhere. I don't know that. Would you trade places with the Steelers roster wise?
Maybe. I don't.
What gives you the maybe? What about the roster makes you like, yeah, I might take that?
Immediately gonna pick a fight with Griff here. Their quarterback situation is more clearly open, and I think their path forward is maybe just a little bit more obvious in terms of, hey, you got to go find a quarterback.
Griff, would you trade the Steelers roster and their situation for the Seahawks?
I mean, they have O-line figured out, and that's not really a problem for them, like as an organization. And so maybe that gives me the most pause. We're talking like the next 3-year window, I would take Seattle, but beyond that, I mean, I can understand definitely the argument for the Steelers. Maybe the Steelers roster in the NFC might be a little easier to stomach than in the AFC, just because of the competition over there right now. But it's close either way.
Well, there's another team to talk about. There's another couple teams to talk about that played yesterday that I think are relevant for the Seahawks. Jim Harbaugh, is one of the influences on Mike McDonald. A lot of people talk about, like, he's been in the NFL. He's got the experience. He went in with an offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, who he's worked with before, who is certainly aligned with him, who is run-oriented. They were number 2 or number 3 in the NFL in giveaways this year. They were very secure with the football. They had the number 1 ranked defense in terms of points allowed. Seahawks would love to have that. They have 2, maybe 3 really good edge rushers in Bosa and Mack and Tooley. Poona Ford was a good interior defensive player. Sorry, I know that's painful for folks on the pod. They have a young elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. Like, they have a young ascending receiver in Ladd McConkey. How did they do yesterday? I didn't catch that game. How'd that go?
I actually didn't watch the game either. So did you really not watch it, or
I watched
okay.
it.
What did happen in that game?
I actually asked a few people, like, why are the Chargers losing this game? And this was before it turned into the massive blowout.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there wasn't a lot going right for the Texans either. But ultimately, I think people pointed to the cornerback play, the defensive back play for the Texans, just kind of smothering any chances of making complete passes. That plus Will Dissly had Uncle Will had a rough day holding onto the football. But I find that to be a cautionary tale of, like, is that the more realized version? Like, is that a 2025? If you could have the Seahawks look like the Chargers of 2024 and 2025, is that like an ideal outcome? The number 1 ranked defense, even maybe a younger quarterback. I don't know. Like, what did you make of that, Griff?
I mean, I think it was just a really good team they're not fully formed yet, but I think it was a solid team that just choked. And, 1 game sample sizes. I feel like I need to see, year 2, year 3 of the Harbaugh Chargers before, like, I would personally try to characterize them in any direction other than, they had a good regular season and they had a bad game in the wild card round. Like, beyond that, I don't really know what to think.
Yeah, they won 1 more game than the Seahawks. And I would argue, well, I mean, the division is probably better. I mean, with the Broncos, the way that they played, a little bit better. I think the Chiefs were not quite the powerhouse that they seem from a record-wise perspective, and then the Raiders. But they also have a good offensive line. Again, like, there's just a lot of things about the Chargers that are kind of what the Seahawks wish they had, and yet they're not good enough.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think Roman, he's an interesting OC, but ultimately frustrating for me. I think he's kind of a ceiling capper.
Yeah.
He does a lot of good things, but I don't think it's enough to put a team over the top. Especially in 2025.
Let's talk about that, because, I mean, quickly, the Texans are the other one, and everyone's flaming me because I posted this early on when they were down 13-6 in like the second quarter. I stand by it. I mean, they have elite corners. They have elite young edge rusher. They have elite young receiver. They have an elite young quarterback. They have an elite young left tackle. Like, they have a lot of things that Seahawks fans want, and they're super boring. Like, yes, they ended up with 32 points and 4 picks and all that, but for the most part, that is a hard team to watch play, and they have a very low ceiling at this point. Now, they're evolving, but they're still a low ceiling. So with that in mind, I kind of just say, like, you talk about offensive coordinators. Last year, Bobby Slowick was a hot name for head coaching jobs. Now people put him in the grub category of, like, similar challenges with the way he approached offense. You talk about Greg Roman. Is that, like, what is the offensive coordinator that you think Mike Macdonald's going to look for? Is it a Greg Roman type? Griff, I'll go to you first.
I think this is what's kind of fun. Like, we really don't know. We really don't know exactly what Macdonald thinks about offensive football. And like, he's never had to think about offense this much before in his life outside of how to stop it. He's never had to think about, well, what would I do? Obviously through his coordinators, right? But I guess just through the lens of, I think he even said, like, I've never coached offense before in his in a recent presser. And, just through who he's tapped, like the three names, they're all either, well, there's only three of them, but two of them in Brown and Kubiak, you can kind of directly link to the Shanahan-McVay kind of trend right now, which populates like almost half of the league's offensive coordinators. And then obviously Fraley through Ben Johnson. Well, Ben Johnson's kind of running a Sean Payton McVay copy of what they did in Los Angeles with Goff. So that's, indirectly. So, I mean, in that mind's like, does he want the Shanahan offense? But even then, like, that can mean so many different things within that Shanahan McVay tree or the branches therein. You have run heavy versions, you have pass heavy versions, you have under center heavy versions, shotgun heavy versions, and you have balanced combinations therein. So, I mean, really that can mean anything. So I really don't know precisely what he wants. If I had to guess, the main theme he's going for is kind of that nebulous, ambiguous term of balance. And, that can mean 100 different things, but I think that's what he wants.
Nathan, I tend to agree with Griff. I think that everyone's going to assume that McDonald's just going to look for a Greg Roman run-centric guy. Obviously, Hank Fraley comes out as a name, and everyone's like, okay, that's what's going to happen. Is that what you assume is going to happen?
I mean, maybe a little. I mean, they might be a little reflexive about how the season just went. I agree, though. I don't know that Mike really knows what he wants, and I don't know that this is like going back to the idea that they parted ways with Grubb as much because of philosophical reasons as anything. I don't really buy it because I don't think Macdonald has super hardcore philosophical beliefs about how offense should be ran. And when you listen to him talk about, hey, in the press conferences, well, what is your philosophy? Well, we want to be physical. Okay, sure. Like, it's football. Yeah. You want to be physical. Hey, does they have to have been an NFL play caller before? No, right? And he talked about how, they want to be open to finding the best guy, and that can look a lot of different ways. And so I think what he might ultimately kind of fall back on is, if you look at him, I think everything he, as a football coach, his success stems from being a pretty brainy dude. And I think, and you've heard that too in a lot of discussions about Grubb, right? One of the things he did say is he wants an offense that can dictate terms to the defense. And this idea of, attacking, different defensive families and being able to pull apart schemes and stuff like that, which I think is really where him and Grubb ultimately parted ways. Is I don't think he thought Grubb could grow in those ways as much as he needed to, at least. And so I do think we'll probably see somebody come out of this that has a really good understanding of, the chalkboard and like what they want to draw up and how they want to attack things. And maybe less, not saying Fraley's not going to be the guy, but they're not going to go get Fraley just because he's, an offensive lineman who runs a tough offensive line.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you're saying you don't know that you buy the philosophical thing because you don't know that he has a strong enough offensive philosophy. I think that's actually an insightful point. And what makes me think of, though, is back in my old life when I was working at Adobe and we served, designers and creative professionals of all sorts, and they had like very refined taste of what they wanted and all these kinds of things. And then we started trying to serve people like us, who also wanted to create content of some sort. And they're like, well, these people don't know what they want. But what became really evident is if you showed them something that was well designed, they knew it when they saw it.
Right.
And I think that what happened this year with Mike McDonald is that in a number of high leverage moments, he might not have had a clear offensive identity and philosophy, but he found it. He found some key markers this year in high leverage play calls where he's like, wait, why did we just do that? Like, that's not what I would have wanted us to do, or even in the same like part of the playbook I would have wanted us to be in.
Mhm.
And I think that's where I buy the philosophical difference, but I agree with you, Nathan. I think his philosophy is still under development for sure. So before we get it, we'll get into draft stuff here in a sec, because I want to spend some time there for sure. But any of the current OC names get you guys excited? Anyone like we've got Kubiak, we've got Fraley, and we've got Thomas Brown. Now, again, to recap for people that don't know, the reason that none of the coaches that work for any of the wildcard teams that are playing this weekend were listed is because they can't. So they can't be interviewed till next week. If they lose, they can do an in-person interview with those folks. If the team wins, they can do a virtual interview. So all of those folks will be available for interviews next week. We will certainly get a lot more names next week, but the 3 names this week all came from teams that are already out, are on a bye, one of the two. That's why Hank Fraley was available. So Griff, any initial reactions or guys that piqued your interest?
Fraley definitely jumps out the most, just because he's coming from the offense that is, really, really good. I think Brown and Kubiak, they're probably closer to unknowns than known quantities, just because of their respective situations. So it's not that I'm anti them in any sense. It's just more like, well, Fraley has more going for him from like a superficial lens. I think the big question with Fraley is like, well, him being the O-line coach, how does he handle the drop back passing game? That would be my question. But for me, the litmus test, like the number one thing the new OC needs to be able to do is they need to like revive under center completely, the under center run game and under center play action. If you want to be like really simplistic with it, and if you were to just plant your flag on like one thing the next OC needs to do, it's you have to be able to have a good play action game with the skill sets available to you. Most offensive coordinators, I mean, like Matt Nagy was able to have like top 5 play action numbers with Mitchell Trubisky, in 2018. Like if you can do it with him, you can do it with anybody. So I think in Seattle this past year was just kind of system failure for a lot of different reasons. But they were really good at it the past 2 years, and they just fell off the face of the earth. So Fraley comes in, and like no one uses under center more than the Lions right now, which I think is primarily a Goff thing, but he wouldn't necessarily do as much of it in Seattle. You still do quite a bit of it, but the fact that he has all that volume installed in their playbook, and he can all sorts of run scheme, all sorts of play fakes off of that run scheme. I mean, there's no question he'd be able to institute that. So that would immediately get you back in that area. The only remaining question with him would be, how does he handle, out of the gun when it's time to, 5-step drop, read it out? How does he coach and install that? So I think that's where whoever the passing game coordinator is coming in, like they need to have that really strong kind of chemistry between the two. But probably Fraley, just to answer the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. Josh McCown's a guy that I'm kind of interested in to see what happens next week, obviously. But there's real potential that Ben Johnson gets a head coaching job somewhere, and maybe he wants to bring Fraley with him. There's a chance that maybe Brian Flores gets a job somewhere and brings Josh McCown with him to be his OC. Like, there's some of these things that may be out of the Seahawks' hands, depending on how these head coach things fall out. Nathan, not limiting to the guys that have been already confirmed as candidates, do you have one or two, or is there you have a guy that you would be ecstatic if they announced this is the guy?
Nobody that I'd be like ecstatic about. I mean, I would be really excited, I think, for Fraley. I would talk myself into that pretty fast. I was listening to Griff, actually. I think he did a pod yesterday or the day before, where Griff, you were talking about in Detroit how like they run everything like in their run game. They run, you know, counter, they run duo, they run inside zone, outside zone. Like they have a complete running game, and that to me just really clicked with. And I think you made this point, but like, you know, if you're Mike Macdonald, you want to be able to dictate terms to a defense. You have to be able to do a lot of different things, right? Because you have to be able to adapt to what they're doing and force them out or into whatever you want. And so if you have a really, you know, Fraley can bring that completeness in the running game. Now, the big question with him is how much of it is even him? He's got, you know, Campbell and Ingstrom and Ben Johnson all there with him. You know, how much of that can he really do on his own? You know, who's the passing game coordinator, you know, all that kind of stuff. But just having that approach so far in his career is really interesting. You mentioned Matt Nagy. He is actually interviewing for head coaching. He got a Jets interview for the head coaching job.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a play caller in Kansas City, but that's a mildly interesting name that I hadn't really heard thrown around much.
I actually liked what he did in Chicago early on. I thought there was a lot of variety and creativity to his play calls. I thought he made the game somewhat easier on his quarterbacks. There was a lot of a lot of yards after catch, kind of moving people into space. Later, it felt very limited. Like it seemed like his bag of tricks was not very deep, and he kind of got found out. So I don't know from there, but that like if you could take what Nagy has shown and add that to what the Seahawks have, not make that exclusively what they have, but it would just be really nice. I think that's kind of what, to get back to your point, Nathan, about like maybe McDonald doesn't really know his offensive philosophy. I'm not convinced he's going to go just hire Greg Roman or a Greg Roman clone. I'm not sure he knows what he's going to hire yet until he gets through these interviews. And I think he's proven already with his hires, he's not just going to go back to people that he's got clear connection with. He is going to look for people that have something that he maybe didn't know he needed, or that he has respect for. And so in my opinion, this is kind of his first true hiring process. And as anyone who's done hiring before, it's hard. It can be really hard. And often your first hires are your worst hires, and you learn along the way. I'll just say, like, one of the classic hiring mistakes for any manager, I certainly made this early on, treating it like professional sports and drafts, which we'll talk about in a second, which is pick on potential, hire on potential. The best hires you're generally going to make are people that have already done it and are still excited to do it. And so a lot of people in this coaching room have been hired on potential. And I think that I'm hoping that they get someone who, you know, still wants to prove themselves, but is not learning everything this time. I think that's a preference for me.
Don't tell Mike that this is his first time going through the whole process.
Yeah.
You got real prickly about that.
Yeah. I think it was also who asked the question. Like there's questions that are, anyway, I thought that was a bad faith question, to be honest. And I think he got a bad faith answer for it. I'm not a big reader. I'll admit that. Like I read a lot of things, but I don't read a lot of books, I should say. Not proud of that, but it's just true. But recently I was like, I really feel like I want to get into a book. The last like big book series I read was Game of Thrones, and like I'm stuck because they don't come out with any more. So have you ever heard of Dungeon Crawler Carl?
No.
All right, I'm going to do a quick explanation. We'll move on. But this is like, it's like probably a book for like teenagers, to be totally honest. But it's the basic concept is the planet Earth, like every structure on Earth just plummets below Earth. Anyone that was in a structure dies. And it just so happens this guy was chasing his girlfriend's cat outside at 2 a.m. in Seattle. And he's got basically a leather coat on and some of his girlfriend's clogs or whatever. And so he survives and finds out that he has two choices. He either can try to survive on the planet, or he can go below ground and enter this game where he and his cat have to survive 18 levels in order to, save the planet or whatever. The reason I'm bringing this all up is it's basically like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets Dungeons and Dragons. It's very tongue in cheek. There's a lot of Seattle references, but all along the way, his cat Donut and Carl are getting all these little power-ups, right? Like they have their heads-up display. They have like charisma for the cat is super high. The cat can convince anybody to do anything it wants. Carl's got these other things. And so I'm very much in this mindset of like, you have a certain amount of skill points you can allot to anything, and you can have to take away from something in order to gain something else. And so when I think about the Seahawks right now, before we get into talking draft, if you could pick any attribute for the Seahawks to level up, to really level up, and it's not offensive line, I'm going to limit it because that's just too obvious. What attributes of this team, and I'm getting it like totally open-ended other than offensive line, and it doesn't have to be a position group. It can be literally a characteristic, but like what attributes do you want to level up for the Seahawks? Nathan, I'll go for you first.
Yeah. What a weird question.
Yep, it's a Sunday morning. That's what you get.
Okay, cool. You said not offensive line. I can't say.
You can't just say offensive line. I will let you cheat a little bit if there's an attribute related to improving the offensive line characteristic of the team. I'll allow it, but I'm looking for something a little less straightforward than that.
I mean, there's kind of two things that immediately jump to mind for me. I mean, one is obviously we need to put some points into Gino's red zone awareness or something. Like those interceptions, some of those plays, they have to stop. If we can at least I would be a lot less stressed about this team if they even didn't look as bad as they did sometimes, where it was just like, well, there was no one, you just threw it right to the other team. Why did you do that? And I mean, I know that there's, I know we have the resident Gino defender on here. So I will say, like, I know there's a lot of caveats and stuff to all that. But the other thing is, I think, I don't know, like, the secondaries, like, I feel like this secondary should have forced more turnovers, and I don't understand why they didn't. And so we gotta up the slider on ball hawkingness or something in the secondary. That's something that I'm really hoping, the next year or two, that they can find a way to force. I don't even know where they actually ended up, and maybe I'm way off on this. Maybe the numbers don't back me up on this, but it just felt like, especially with guys like Woolen and Witherspoon and some of this, like, they should have got their hands on more balls. They should have taken more balls away.
Griff?
Man, I'm trying to. I don't know if I want to go for like a intangible abstract concept or something more like literal.
We could take both.
Maybe. I guess. Well, for my mind with the defense, I think they need to. I think, and Mike will try to do this, they need to like beef up the different ways they can defend the run, like on first down in particular. And I think that will have like positive knock-on effects, not just for first down run defense, but like everywhere. Like if you become a killer on first down, because you're already amazing on like any sort of like 2nd and 5+ any third down scenario. So I think that they have the players that would just come from a little more scheme investment on 1st and 10. I think, I don't know, to kind of be more something that links all the players together, maybe more like, I don't know how to describe this as one like trait or something, but like up the sliders on like winning on the leverage you line up in. I guess like just because that would mean like more speed everywhere. Honestly, you could relate that to the offense too, with like the play action protections needing more variety or something. To kind of put them in some weird spots at times. So I don't know, maybe just like I hear, how about this, like path of least resistance scheming. There's benefits to not doing that. It's not like, oh well, why wouldn't you always do that? Like there's trade-offs to it. but some like in a way kind of simplifying things.
Those two things are related too, right? Like I think my impression is that part of the struggles on first down is because I still don't totally understand how McDonald expects his front seven to like fit the run all the time. And so I wonder, like, does some of that complexity make it more challenging at times to get the job done on first down?
It inherently is more subjective on average than objective. Just because something's subjective doesn't mean there isn't a right answer. It doesn't mean it's like, oh, do what you want. But like there's still a protocol. But it's definitely like, even when they're gapped out, so you've got one defender for every gap formed by the offense, it's still not as simple as like just go nail the A gap. Like they're
like reacting to how the offense is trying to block them and different things like that, right?
Right. And then also like paying attention to what the running back is doing more than you would otherwise. And McDonald said something early on in the year. He said, like, the way we do it, we don't necessarily get as many TFLs as we would otherwise, but we try to cap more explosives in the run game. Like that definitely is true. And like that's the trade-off, because in a way it's more conservative in a way. It's like aggressively conservative, maybe, if you want to frame it that way, because it's like more sound. But then also, like, if you're bad at it, you're incredibly not sound, like less sound than you would have been otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, I think one way you can relieve that is just by throwing more scheme, like more schemed actions, like run stunts, run blitzes and stuff. You don't have to change the base way you play your techniques. That's I don't think he's going to change like the main way he coaches defense. I think the changes will come via him introducing more like first and 10 scheme, because he just lines up and plays like his 3 or 4 core calls on first and 10. He doesn't really jazz it up there.
Yeah, I think I've had some questions a little bit about, I mean, they've said they do not generally play on the other side of the line. Like that's intentional, that they're not as much of a penetrating defensive line. And I wonder about how that affects a guy like Byron Murphy, who I think is really good playing on the other side of the line. Yeah. But obviously it worked out really well for Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed. And so it's not like impossible to be productive as a defensive lineman, but it is interesting. I'll share with you guys, like, I didn't think about this beforehand. I literally made that question up on the spot, so I'm not cheating in this, but those and other great questions to come, by the way. But for me, I would actually add a lot of strength, a lot to charisma. Like, and I mean that not only from an entertainment perspective, but from a galvanizing of the people in that locker room perspective. Like, you look in the offensive line room, I see Charles Cross trying. That's not who he is. Like, he's just not that guy. Abe Lucas has some of that, but he's quiet, like he's not gonna, you look in the receiver room. Like, I don't know that there's the right type of charisma in there. You look at the defensive line is probably the only place where I'd say maybe they've got the right stuff in there. The cornerback room, maybe, right? But like, I don't know. That for me is a big thing that's missing. And it's also affecting the fact that a lot of fans, other than us hardcore folks, have just not fallen in love with this team. Like, and if you look at all pro voting, Pro Bowl voting, if you don't think charisma has something to do with who gets it and who doesn't, you're crazy. You're crazy. So charisma is one I would put out there, and then strength in general, mostly on offense, but like just being the more rugged team is something I'd love to continue to see them. I continue to think that that's a big part. And last I'd say is speed. I know that seems kind of odd, but specifically in the receiver room, I think they need more explosive. Maybe I would take quickness or speed. But ideally a combination of the two, because I feel like that's lacking. Even if we get the right OC in here, getting DK into space is not that necessarily that interesting. You're almost as likely to lose the ball in a fumble as you are as to get something big out of it. And like, JSN has some things to add there, but again, I don't see him as the most explosive player in space. He's done really well yards after catch, better than I would have expected. But I feel like that's a missing element if you're going to be even alternative to running plays, in there. So those are the things that are kind of on my mind. And with that, as we go into talking about draft guys, do you have any draft crushes so far? I know it's very early on. Is there either position or a couple players that have started to catch your eye? Nathan, I know you've been spending a lot of time looking at this. I'll start with you.
I have two. One, I'm really curious if you've watched all, is Jihad Campbell, Griff. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at him at all. He's really fun. I feel like he would fit really well in Mike's defense. I wouldn't say pass coverage is his strength, but like he looks like he feels comfortable in his drops and everything. But playing downhill, he's a beast. He can even give you a tiny bit of edge rush, but like he's able to blitz and get off blocks and attack blocks, and he has just an incredible ability to deliver a hell of a lot of pop on most all of his tackles. Like tackles that you wouldn't expect him to really hit somebody that hard, and suddenly they're flying backwards and stuff. So he's been a ton of fun for me to watch. And my other guys, I really like Gunnar Helm. He's fun for me. Not as a first or second round guy, but a little farther down, I like him a lot.
Griff, how about you?
I haven't been able to watch Campbell, unfortunately, so I'll definitely watch him. Most of my the linebackers that I'm familiar with are the linebackers I watched last year that didn't declare, so I haven't really kept tabs with them. I really need to dive in. But the names that I remember were Barrett Carter out of Clemson. He might be undersized, but I like his package otherwise. There was I think Higgins out of Iowa State or Iowa. I don't remember. I thought he was a really good run defender, but really slow in coverage. And I think that he's going to be one of those guys that gets talked about as one of the main guys in the class. And then the more you watch him, the more you're like, I don't know if he actually is what you want out of a 3-down linebacker. Then there's a guy who transferred out of Wisconsin. I don't remember where he went. Jordan Turner, I think his name was. I really liked his movement skills at Wisconsin. I think he's a really good linebacker all around. I don't know why he transferred. I would have stayed at Wisconsin if I was him, just for his own, I don't know, draft sake. But those guys. But my number one draft crush right now, and it's not a deep cut at all, it's Tyler Warren, the tight end. Penn State, man. I want a guy. I want a giraffe for Geno so we can throw some trick shots up the seam. He just hasn't had a guy that can really attack the ball in the air. And Geno likes to throw those types of balls, and he doesn't have anyone on the other end of it, even though he's spoiled with really good receivers. Just that specific skill set isn't there. So I also think a tight end would benefit not just Geno, but would benefit the entire team. It would give them an excuse to play more 12 personnel with he and Barner. And then I also think that if you have 3 really good receivers, I think depending on your specific circumstances, it can be more of a curse than a blessing, because then you feel super inclined to use them. And especially if you have a bad O-line, you're going to feel inclined to pass more. You're just opening up your O-line to more hurt, which in turn can then put those 3 receivers at a bigger disadvantage because they have to catch the ball in situations where the defense knows you're throwing. So I think if you want 3 really good targets, I think the jackpot is having 2 of them being receivers and 1 of them being a really good tight end, because it's easier to be formationally flexible that way.
Yeah, I was gonna look this up, but you finished before I finished. I could do it, but I feel like they were in a lot of 12 personnel this year. Like there was a fair amount of tight end usage, but they had 1 tight end that was worth having on the field most of the time, right? Like and that's AJ Barner for what it's worth. Like I think I'm not a big fan, and certainly not a big Pharaoh Brown fan. I'm not sure that those exist outside of his house. But so yeah, I'm there. I know Nathan is a Tyler Warren detractor. Is that
really?
Right? Is that fair?
I do worry that I'm overthinking him a bit, but like you did the mock draft yesterday, and at 18, like it was the chat was just Warren, and I'm like, there's so many offensive linemen. Like, what are we doing? I think, I don't know that I think his movement skills are actually that amazing. I'm really interested to see how he tests. Obviously, a ton of his production is off stuff that NFL teams are not going to be running for him. And an NFL team's not going to design an entire offense around him and have him throw passes and all that stuff. I do agree, though, like his ability to go get a ball is really impressive. And he does move well, and I don't know, his blocking's fine, I guess. I haven't been super impressed with that. So to me, it's like 18, I don't know, but like also, do I have any question that he's going to be a good football player in the NFL? Like, no, not really. So yeah, I'm not a stan, but I don't know if I'd say I'm going to try.
The thing where I'm at with Warren is, I believe some these things are all potentially true. I think that people are going to greatly overvalue him based off recency bias with Bowers. Like, I think people are comparing him to Gronk, and like, I think this is a disservice. I don't think that's who he is. I also think he's a very good football player. I think he's going to be a very good blocker. I think he can be a very good receiver. I think that his fully realized self, if everything goes well, is more George Kittle. Like, and I think that would be great if you could insert George Kittle into this offense over a mediocre guard. I actually think that he might make as much or more of a difference. So that's where I see Warren. And by the way, I did get a chance to look it up. I was wrong. Seahawks 23rd in the NFL in 12 personnel frequency rate. So they did not use a lot of two tight end. And for what it's worth, Griff, I kind of think that this team in its best form would be a 12 personnel team. I don't know if the three receiver sets are going to do as much for them. And I also wonder if they're going to be thinking like Jake Bobo's our third receiver and he's in there to run block anyway. So it is interesting to think about tight end. One more question before we get into some mock drafts. Quarterback. What do you guys make of this quarterback class? And the way I'm going to ask this question specifically is, if Will Levis and Joe Milton were in this class, where would they go? Where would you rank them relative to the guys that are there? Those are probably two separate questions, but Nathan, do you have a thought?
I think Milton goes exactly where he went last year. I don't think that changes anything. Definitely some recency bias there with his one good game, but like, he was not an impressive college quarterback. I mean, he could throw it a mile, but so I don't think his stock changes a lot. I mean, Levis is an interesting question. I think the thing we probably forget with him is people were pretty sure he was a top 10 pick. And then he wasn't a first round pick at all. And that was, I think, even for Levis detractors, him sliding all the way out of the first round was a bit of a surprise. So in this class, does he end up going into the first round? Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know that either of those guys actually changed a lot. Now, like, where are they relative to the rest of the class is obviously there's a big difference there. But I don't know if where they get drafted really changes. And that's why I'm a little skeptical of, is Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, are they really top 10 picks? Is that really going to happen? I mean, maybe. I've not had a good feel for when the NFL is going to overdraft quarterbacks or not overdraft quarterbacks, but I don't know. I'm not convinced those guys are going as high as everyone thinks they are.
Yeah.
Where are you with this, Griff?
I think I'm with Nathan. I don't think it changes much, which speaks to, how depressing this quarterback class is. There's some life there. You can squint with a couple of prospects. I don't think the Seahawks are in a position of drafting a quarterback in round one. I think they're looking at day 2 or day 3, maybe. I don't think they're moving heaven and earth for a quarterback replacement this season, regardless of how anyone feels about Geno. I just don't see a viable option there. I've always like, I believe John Schneider when he says he wants to draft a quarterback every year. Like, he says lots of things. I believe him on that. I buy his reasoning that it just hasn't come to fruition, like with the way the draft falls and everything. And maybe there being some drama with not wanting to disturb Russ too much when he was here. But I mean, I'm for the concept of draft. Like, I would have been totally cool with taking Rattler in the 3rd round last year. Like, sure, why not? It's a 3rd round pick, you know? So.
Yeah. I actually like Cam Ward. I liked him last year. I thought he would have been a late 1st round pick last year. He had a great year this year for the most part. I think that there's just maybe a higher chance that he becomes Tyrod Taylor than he becomes something more interesting than that. Like, I don't think his skill set is very clearly projectable to being a top end starter. Shedeur Sanders, I think, has a lot of interesting skills, but there's some questions there. He probably has the most complete package to offer, NFL from a skill set perspective. But you talk about Joe Milton. The reason I bring that up, not because of just this last game he played, but Joe Milton was, 6'5", 240, he has a Josh Allen cannon. Like, he has an undoubtedly massively powerful arm. He went in the 6th round. That's where I thought I think that's where his level of quarterback should go. People are talking about Jalen Milroe going in the top 15. Some people have him going top 10. Like, you can't tell me Jalen Milroe is a better college quarterback than Joe Milton. Like, if you look at their numbers, I mean, last year, Jalen Milroe or this year, I should say, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. In Milton's final year, he had 20 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. I don't think Jalen Milroe has a passing tool that is anywhere near Joe Milton's, best passing abilities. Milroe has a little bit more of the evasiveness and the running, but Milton's not that bad in that category either. So to me, Jalen Milroe and Joe Milton are like similar enough. And we're talking about one of them going in the 1st round this year, maybe the top half of the 1st round. So that's where, for me, I feel like this quarterback class is so bad. Jackson Dart, like, you guys have any takes on him?
His numbers look okay, which was a little surprising. The Lane Kiffin offense is a total lie, though, so I don't know what to make of him.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a Dart guy. I agree with you, Brian. Like, Cam Ward would be my favorite quarterback of this class. He definitely has the most going for him. Sanders is interesting in that, like, he's a good quarterback. He just isn't very talented. Like, he's not a great athlete. He doesn't have a great arm. I mean, it's kind of it's similar-ish like theory as like JJ McCarthy. Like, they know what they're doing, but like, to what extent does that matter at the next level? So it's kind of tricky. But that said, who that also describes coming out was Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins is an example of a guy who got genuinely better at everything in the NFL, like even his arm strength, like his reworked his mechanics, decision-making, pocket presence, all of it. So, I mean, I think every team should still be looking for the next Kirk Cousins. Maybe that's Sanders. Maybe Sanders is the guy who just becomes inexplicably better at everything. I don't know. Maybe McCarthy is that. But so again, like, if Sanders is there in the 3rd round, like, sure, why not? I'm not against it.
He's not gonna be there in the 3rd round.
Yeah. So exactly. So it's all moot, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's do a mock, and I will let me say we're gonna try using the Pro Football Network one, because PFF's been so comically bad. I think all the simulators are pretty bad right now, just so folks know, like, they're just off. But we're going to do a quick 3-rounder here, and I'm going to so Shedeur Sanders does not go in the 3rd round. He goes 1st overall here. I'm going to zoom. I'll rewind back to where these picks are and see if you have any commentary on any of these guys before they get to the Seahawks. All right. Oh, wait. Why did it not let us pick? Hold on. Let's try that again. We are the Seattle Seahawks. We'll do a 3-round. Let's make it go faster, and let's go. All right, here we go. Okay. So here, Shedeur Sanders goes number 1. Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, McMillan, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Ginty, top 10 to the Panthers. Interesting. Michael Williams, edge player from Georgia. Luther Burden, a wide receiver from Missouri. Will Campbell going to the 49ers is maybe the pick I most do not want to happen. Those bastards just throw in all their games at the end of the season to get a pick. Tyler Booker goes 12 overall to the Cowboys. James Pierce, pretty high. Colston Loveland goes ahead of Tyler Warren. Nick Scourton, edge player. Siobhan Ravel, cornerback. And then Warren goes right before the Seahawks at 17. Any thoughts on any of those names?
Abdul Carter, the Giants would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. They got a lot of edge, that's for sure. Add that to Dexter Lawrence. Any of these guys that you sneaky hope fall to the Seahawks?
I mean, I'm not opposed to Booker falling. I have a hard time thinking a guard would go 12th overall.
I don't think he's going 12. I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
And there's enough other options. I mean, even if a few other offensive linemen go before Seattle, there's other ways to go. I don't think Booker's a must-have. In fact, I'm not even sure I like him more than I like is it Donovan Jackson at
Ohio State? Yeah. All right, so here we are at 18. You do have Malachi Starks available, safety. Is there any party that's tempted to go safety?
I think so. I don't think. I mean, I don't think Kobe Bryant needs to be handed the job. Obviously, you've got Julian Love. He played awesome this year. And then I think safety is absolutely a place that they should be looking at. Starks is not a guy that I've actually watched, though.
Is Starks a guy? I mean, obviously, Rayshon Jenkins is almost certainly going to be let go. We know that cornerback is kind of a sneaky need for the Seahawks. Is Starks a guy that could mitigate that need? Either you guys know his game well enough to know whether he's going to be able to help. I mean, obviously, Kobe Bryant can play a little nickel. Any thoughts there, Griff?
So I did watch him last year, and it was one of those cases where I'm watching the guys that were draft eligible last year. I'm like, who's this 24 guy? And so sure enough, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's good. That's a no-brainer. So he's 6'1", 200. I mean, I think he's every bit a McDonald fit. I don't necessarily think he's like a slam dunk top half of the first round pick, but definitely if I had to have guessed a fringe first round guy. So if they really like him at 18, and I'm going to assume McDonald, if they took him at 18, it'd be because McDonald really likes him, that I'd be, for that. He definitely can do he's one of those guys, one of those safeties who's just a complete safety, can do a little bit of everything. And that's definitely how McDonald likes to wield his safeties. So he can play the big nickel stuff. He can be cover 3 down safety, a little bit of matchup in the slot. He can do deep coverage fine. His quarters is really good. Explosive downhill player, tackles well. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, if he was the guy at 18, I wouldn't be clutching my pearls, it'd be fine. I'd be yeah, okay, that's
yeah. Well, there's Jihad Campbell for you down here at 39.
Yeah,
at least in their draft list. So, Derek Harmon's an interesting name. I think defensive tackle is still an interesting one. You assume that they're going to bring back Jaron Reed, but you don't know for sure. I like Savania, as my kind of top guard prospect. Harold Fannin Jr. is an interesting tight end. I don't know if I'd go first round with him. Any of these other names for you guys that, you'd say, yeah, turn in the card?
Cameron Williams for sure. He probably has the talent to stick at tackle. But yeah, 6'5", 335. You're not going to have any. He looks like an obvious guy to slide in too. So he I think is an awesome fit for Seattle. Whether it's long-term tackle option or if you have injuries, swing tackle, or just stick him at guard and let him go. Athletic, big, strong, pretty refined. I think he's got a solid technique and skill set and everything. So like, to me, I really want him to go offensive line in the first round, so it feels a little weird not to do it. But like, I think Starks is kind of a sneaky thing for them to maybe do, especially without having a better idea of how these boards are really shaping up. Like, I think a lot of these offensive linemen that are falling into the second and third round in these simulators right now are first rounders.
Yeah.
So where these offensive line cliffs are is really going to make the difference. But the way this
let's do this
right
though.
now,
Let's make it a little harder. I think Starks being available at 18 is fiction.
Okay.
I don't think that's going to happen. So let's make it harder on ourselves. Of the other guys here, Griff, I'm going to give you first choice here. Which position group and which player would you go for?
Let's just get the ugly 300-pounder in here. Get a guard, get someone that can block somebody. So probably Cam Williams.
You'll take Cam Williams. All right, we'll take Cam Williams. Not a guy that's been a lot of conversation about, so that's a fun departure. We're going to look at where some other players went real quick. Derek Harmon goes a couple picks later. Starks goes a number of picks later. That's just not going to happen. Harold Fannin goes the first round. I think that might happen. Savania goes early. Shamar Stewart in the second round. Interesting. Milrow goes early second. Donovan Jackson goes middle of the second. Kenneth Grant's an interesting name. Ursery, another name there from an offensive line perspective.
I don't like him a ton.
Grant? Yeah, he's kind of...
Ursery.
Oh, who? Ursery.
Yeah, he's one of those... There is a offensive... There's a tackle aesthetic that I absolutely despise, and it's those they're big, long dudes, which is everything you want from a tackle. And then they have these clunky drop back things that they're doing, and I hate it. I can't stand it. And he's kind of got that. And yeah, I'm not a nursery guy. I'm out on him.
Noted. So anti-Ursery. Luckily, you don't have to worry about it. Well, your guy Jihad Campbell is the number one. So I think we know where you're going. Quinn Ewers. Oh my God. I will not allow that name to be called. You got Isaiah Bond at receiver. Another, I think, growing popular name. Jack Sawyer, the hero of the Buckeyes against the Texas Longhorns. Connerly Jr., also a name that increasingly is being linked to this. A lot of people have been going to the Seahawks in the first round. For me, like, he's a little bit light for guard, but at 315, but we could see. Any of these other names, Tez Johnson's, I think, an interesting guy. Any of these other names that kind of jump out to you, Nathan? There's Gunner.
Yeah, probably a little early for him.
I like Jabbar Muhammad at corner. I mean, not in the second round, but I think he's got some. I think he's got some potential to stick in the league as a third corner.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like Jihad Campbell is pretty fun.
So tell me about using a second round pick on an inside backer.
That's the only thing, right? Is like, I don't feel the need to upgrade over Tyrese Knight. Now, maybe they don't want to pay Ernest Jones, which would be a bummer, but like, they're also kind of not out anything in that scenario. So that's the thing that makes it hard to justify is how do you actually get him on the field?
I don't know anything about Tumolao. I gotta get these names down. JT.
I liked him last year, but then what I saw of him this year felt a little mid.
I saw someone compare Jack Sawyer to Max Crosby.
They are both white.
That's about where, like, physically, it doesn't feel like that's a viable comparison, at least from an explosion standpoint, but maybe I'll learn differently. All right. So what are you going to do here, Nathan? We went.
Oh, it's me?
Yep, it's you because we went Cam Williams in the first round. So where do we go here?
Does anyone have an opinion on a corner? On any of these cornerbacks? Do we know Maxwell Hairston?
I don't.
I don't know, Griff. Do you have a strong opinion on? Because I love Campbell, but like the fit is tough.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the corners to really say. I see Barrett Carter there. I would definitely think about him in the second round.
I guess, is there any reason not to take Connerly here? I mean, Samea was okay, promising, but like, I don't know that you need to, put his name in cement as a starter.
You're going to spam the offensive line.
I do think Carter's like a really good play. Like the thing with Connerly for me is he feels very pure tackle, which isn't to say you couldn't move him in and he could be a good guard. It just feels a little bad doing that with him. But
yeah,
again, like having depth at the position, more competition at guard, I don't hate the idea.
I would make the case for either Bond because I think he has a lot of what the team lacks from a receiver perspective, or edge because I think that they're going to be down Draymond Jones and we'll see what happens elsewhere. But that's the only thing. I'm not sure that taking another offensive lineman is going to upgrade you that much if you've already taken one. But that's my only argument. So your call, Nathan. You
Okay.
Make it.
Let's go with. Let's do Connerly. I really want to do Campbell, but let's do Connerly.
We're spamming the offensive line. I think a lot of Seahawks fans are feeling some comfort from that. All right, we're doing just a 3-round mock, so we'll let you guys get out of here in a second. So now we are in the third round. We've taken 2 offensive linemen. Where does your attention go next? Cornerback, receiver, tight end, edge, quarterback?
Gunnar Helm sitting right there.
Yeah, Helm. There's Josiah Stewart.
Talk to us about Josiah.
Well, he's disappointed a little bit relatively, but I think he's really talented. Maybe a little undersized. Probably doesn't have the length requisites that they want. Prerequisite. I think he knows how to rush the edge, though. He might be one of those depth pass rushers that comes off the bench. I don't know how much they really need that. But him there in the third round is interesting.
You guys know much about Mason Taylor?
Mm-mm.
No.
What about the other Penn State edge player, Dennis Sutton?
Nope. But sounds like your typical Penn State edge.
Yeah, Chopper Robinson did pretty well this year.
Yeah, he did.
All right, Griff, this is your call. We're gonna let you close this out here. Where do you go?
Okay.
A lot of tight ends, man.
I need to watch more of Helm, but I'm not against that. I think here, can we see what's that safety?
Yeah.
I need to familiarize. I got to dive into the tape, man, and watch.
This is we're all in the same place here.
Yeah. Of the names I'm familiar with, I would feel the most comfortable with Helm, I think.
Okay. Let's go and get Gunnar Helm. You guys give it another sales pitch on Helm. Why do you guys like Helm?
To me, I mean, he's a really good route runner. Like he's got really feel for how to just work with the quarterback, or just how he chips and gets out into routes and how he uses his body and everything. Catches the ball really well, moves well with the ball. He's not Brock Bowers. He's not Tyler Warren. He's not a top elite tight end. But I think he's AJ Barner plus. And just I have been consistent every time I watch him. He is doing something interesting to get himself open. And I think that
Mhm.
is something that can translate. Like that gives me a lot of confidence he's going to really be able to produce in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's not one of those tight ends that isn't a regular tight end. Like he's an actual
Mhm.
Y. It doesn't mean you can't flex him out, but he definitely uses his length. So the fact that he's a legitimate Y means that you're not formationally hamstrung. You can like and just insert him into your regular offense. And a part of the reasons why like tight end production is so easy is because it's just so much of it is structure, and you don't have to again adapt your structure. You don't have to accommodate him. He accommodates you. And then he's 6'6" and he uses his body. And he, like Nathan was saying, he's got some wiggle and some zone sense of how to separate at the top of the route. I just think he has legitimate pass catching skills. So he's definitely a guy like in the third, fourth round, I'd be all over. I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? That's great, you know. And if nothing happens, like, well, it's a third round pick. Who cares?
Yeah.
So.
Well, a couple of quick super chats. I think Josh Connerly Jr. is going to shoot up draft boards and could be an option at left guard at 18 or maybe even after a slight trade back. That comes from Corey Coleman. So I think there's some agreement there. And then Matthew McManus says, Brian, I know it's early, but give us 2 or 3 guys you're looking forward to seeing at the Senior Bowl, maybe one guy from Griff or Nathan. Have you guys seen the Senior Bowl rosters?
Only bits and pieces. The Marshall, the guy from Green from Marshall, he's not actually a senior, but he's going, right?
I think so. Yes, I think I saw he's going. Let me make sure I've got the. Oh no, that's the 2024 roster. That's not going to do. Here we go. I will share this so you guys can see it real quick, and then we'll get you out of here. Here we go. So here's some of the names. For me, I'm probably like Sevenaya is a guy that I've just been excited about. So I'm excited to see him. A lot of the trench guys. So if we sort by defensive tackle and offensive lineman, I'm actually interested in Deion Walker as well. I've heard some interesting things about him. I am interested in Jordan Birch is a guy who I think could actually end up moving up draft boards on the edge. I think he's got prototypical size and some really interesting skills, and a lot of people have him in like the 3rd round. I think he's definitely a guy I'd be comfortable taking earlier than that. So there's a couple of guys. Anyone for you that you guys want to, as I'm scrolling through here, Shamar Stewart's a name that's gotten some buzz. The quarterbacks are certainly interesting in this one.
There's a ton of names this year. I feel like
it's a really good class, like in the Senior Bowl specifically.
I love both of the A&M guys. How do you say the Arizona
Sevenaya?
Yeah, just if I were to go in person just to see how big that dude is in real life would be really cool.
I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart in person and seeing how they look. The running back class, it's a shame the Seahawks have spammed running back for so many years because it's just a super deep running back class.
Well, they might do it again though.
You think so?
I don't think that they're going to say no outright. In fact, I don't know how McDonald perceives the run game, but does he just think like, oh, I want a better runner, a more complete runner? Is he looking for the guy that is both Charbonnet and Walker in the same body? I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a really, I think of the position groups that really feel deep, tight end is one of them, running backs another, and then maybe offensive line. I would say like it feels like not like a super high ceiling, but a lot of like solid starter offensive linemen is kind of like the feel I get. And actually not so bad at defensive tackle. Seems like there's some decent depth there. Maybe they get their Jonathan Hankins replacement somewhere along the way. Guys, I've kept you longer than planned. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday. Griff, anything coming up on Seattle Overload that people should check out?
I think we're just going to be doing draft stuff from here on out. So then we do so frenetically. So we'll just latch on to certain guys and I don't know, talk about it. I don't know. We'll see.
I hear you, man. Well, we'll be doing the same. We'll have some more crossovers. And Nathan, man, thanks so much for coming on. I know you've been obsessively doing draft prep more than even I have. So we'll tap into that and do more of these along the way.
Yeah, I'm excited about this draft this year. It'll be good.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of Wildcard Weekend. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me in all the places at Hawk Blogger, and I'll be back with you tomorrow morning with Robert Mays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. See you then. Take care.